TH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you might have forgotten about from Modern Horizons 2. Of course, that was an incredibly impactful Commander set. And in fact, I could make the argument that it is the most impactful set we've gotten for Commander since I've had my channel. And of course, it wasn't supposed to be a Commander set, but definitely we got an absolute ton of Commander staples from that set. I just did my anniversary video talking about the most impactful cards for the Commander format since my channel has existed, and there was a whole bunch of Modern Horizons 2 cards in that list. But of course, because we get all these super stapley cards from sets, a lot of times the stuff that isn't so stapley gets a little bit forgotten about. So I'm revisiting that set here and talking about some of those cards. It has been just about 4 years since that set came out. So let's go back and take a look and see if we can find some cards that might fit in decks that we've made recently. I'm going to start out with Abiding Grace, 2 and a white enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, choose one. You gain 1 life, or you can return target creature with mana value 1 from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's actually a really powerful effect if you got some creatures in your deck that are 1 mana value, particularly your commander. I mean, there are a couple commanders out there that are white, that are 1 mana value. I think this is a slam dunk there. Worst case scenario, I gain 1 life. I mean, maybe in a life gain deck, it's extra good. If you're in a deck where you both want to be gaining life and you have a couple of creatures that are 1 mana value, might be extra good. Like a Sarah Ascendant is in your deck, right? There's a creature that fits in the life gain theme, but also is 1 mana value. Of course, Esper Sentinel, which came out in this set, is 1 mana value. That's a great creature to get back because, of course, your opponents are going to want to kill it. I think this is a card that could probably go in a few more decks. Let's talk about Fae Offering. This was an interesting one that when it came out, I had seen some people talking about it. I didn't really talk about it much. It can be a difficult one. So 2 and a green enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, if you've cast both a creature spell and a non-creature spell this turn, create a clue, food, and treasure token. Where does this card fit? It's doing so much, but maybe because it's doing so much, that makes it so it fits in less themes. You do have to cast a creature spell and a non-creature spell, but I think in a lot of games that does happen more often than you would think. I actually had a patron play this in a game recently, and they got it right away. They played this and immediately got the trigger on their end step. Of course, this is a non-creature spell, so when you cast it and then you immediately follow it up with a creature, you're guaranteed to get the food, clue, and treasure on your end step. That seems like pretty decent value. I mean, even if you only get this once, that's not bad for 3 mana. If you're in a clue, food, or treasure theme, it might get extra good. Where are you going to play this card? I don't know. It's a funny card because it looks like it's doing a lot, but at the same time, it might be difficult to get this trigger, you know, and of course, the each end step thing is probably never going to happen. I mean, it is possible if you can cast your creatures with flash, but likely you will only be getting it on your end step. But again, even if you only get a couple of triggers off of this, it seems pretty good for 3 mana. Let's talk about another enchantment from Modern Horizons 2 that got quite a bit of buzz, but doesn't really see much play at all. Moderation, 1 white and a blue enchantment. You can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. That doesn't seem great. However, whenever you cast a spell, you get to draw a card. That seems really great. And this was another one that I wasn't sure what to make of it when it came out. I thought, okay, well, only being able to cast 1 spell each turn isn't particularly great. But of course, this is Azorius Colors. Azorius does the instant speed stuff pretty well. A lot of control-y decks in Azorius Colors. Obviously, if you are in a Aphara, God of the Polis deck, it seems pretty good because likely you are casting stuff on other people's turns a lot. So the fact that you can only cast 1 spell each turn is not really going to be much of a drawback. Who's playing this card? Where are you playing it? Might want to give it a revisit. Obsidian Charmaw is one that I was a big fan of when it came out. This actually was in my list, my top 20 cards for Modern Horizons 2. There's a couple of cards on this list that I actually talked about from that set originally. But again, I kind of forgot about this card, and I think a lot of other people did as well. Obsidian Charmaw is a 3 red dragon 4/4, so of course you can easily slot it into your Dragon Tribal deck, although of course there's so much to slot into a Dragon Tribal deck that sometimes it can be hard to find room. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each land your opponents control that could produce colorless mana, so it is likely that you are going to have have, I would say, 3 opponents that have lands that can be tapped for colorless mana. So this thing only cost a red and a red for a 4/4 flyer. That seems pretty good, but also when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls, which of course is something you want to be doing in every commander game. This is one of those cards that, again, because it's a dragon, and we pretty much get this with every dragon now. Dragon Tribal is the most popular tribe in the entire format. So of course, whenever a dragon comes out, people's assumptions immediately go to putting it in a Dragon Tribal deck, but just forget about that. Yeah, maybe this isn't good enough to fit in your Dragon Tribal deck, but I still think it's pretty good to fit in any mono red deck, or pretty much any red deck where you just want to be destroying any non-basic lands your opponents control, which of course should be every commander deck, because every commander deck needs to be destroying non-basic lands. This is a pretty good option. It's a flying creature. It's likely going to cost not a lot of mana. Whether it fits perfectly in your deck or not, you should probably give it a try. Combine Chrysalis is definitely a card that needs a revisit because of what it's specifically doing. So green and a blue artifact. Creature tokens you control have flying. And you can also pay 2 green and a blue, tap it, sacrifice a token, create a 4/4 green beast creature token, activate only as a sorcery. So of course, when this card first came out, there wasn't a lot of decks that it fit into. How many decks in green and blue were cranking out creature tokens? Every commander now, it seems like, is cranking out creature tokens. So of course, I imagine there's just a ton more decks out there that are creating creature tokens in blue and green, right? This is definitely one of those cards that you want to give a revisit. Hey, remember this card? It came out in Modern Horizons 2, but it was doing this very specific thing in this very specific color combination. Let's give it a spotlight because maybe there are some more commanders now where it fits. Break Ties is a card that I've always been a fan of ever since it first came out, but it was in that category of it's not really good enough to fit in a lot of decks because it is I guess a removal spell where there's probably 1,000 other removal spells in mono white that are better, but I still think it is worth giving a mention because it is doing so much. So 2 and a white instant, you can destroy an artifact, you can destroy an enchantment, you can exile a card from a graveyard, or you can reinforce 1, which if you don't know what that does, because not a lot of people do, you can pay 1 white and discard this card to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So I think you could put this in any deck, and of course, it's never going to be bad. You're always going to find lots of situations where you want to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Also, instant speed, exile that creature from your opponent's graveyard they're about to reanimate seems pretty fantastic as well. Where I particularly like this card, though, is in the theme where you want to be putting counters on your creatures, first of all, because of course, this is just another option to do that. Also, it is a discard. Your opponent can't counter it. So that can be relevant, right? That reinforce ability is hard to interact with. So if for some reason you want to instant speed, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature and not have your opponent screw with you, this is a great way to do it. It is a very versatile card. It's doing a lot on one card, but you particularly might want to take a look at it if you're in a +1/+1 counter or discard theme in white. Speaking of discard, Lazotep Chancellor is definitely a card that we got to give a revisit here because we probably have some more commanders where this will fit. Blue and a black zombie wizard 1/3. Whenever you discard a card, you may pay 1. If you do, amass zombies 2, which again, because this is in a very particular theme, in a very particular color combination, at the time it came out, it probably didn't fit in a lot of commander decks and probably fits in a lot more now. This is definitely a card that we got to give a revisit here because we likely have some more commanders now in blue and black, or more themes, or maybe you've just built a deck recently where you are amassing, maybe you're making zombies, likely though in the discard theme. Seems pretty good, right? Whenever you discard a card, just pay 1 and you get to amass zombies 2. That seems like some pretty great value. Sanctifier en-Vec, white and a white human cleric 2/2, protection from black and from red. When Sanctifier en-Vec enters, exile all cards that are black or red from all graveyards. If a black or red permanent, spell, or card not on the battlefield would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So this is graveyard hate, which of course, again, every commander deck needs, but it is doing that only specifically with black and red. This is a card that I thought would be a little more popular in the format and really doesn't see much play It is, of course, color specific. There is probably zero chance you will ever play a commander game where no one's playing black and red. A couple places where this could particularly fit: Cleric Tribal, of course, because it is a cleric, pretty easy slot in there. It is going to put a ton of work in any graveyard theme that is in black and red. Your opponents will absolutely have to get this guy off the table in order to play their deck. Where I also like it though is if you're in a graveyard theme not playing black and red, right? So basically I'm doing a graveyard deck and I don't want to just hate on all graveyards. I just want to hate on my opponent's graveyards. This is graveyard hate that won't hurt me. That is the other place where you might want to give consideration for a card like this. All right, Blessed Respite is one of my personal favorite cards from Modern Horizons 2. I try to put it in as many decks as I can because, again, it is just doing so much. 1 and a green instant. Target player shuffles the graveyard into their library, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So it doesn't look super flashy, of course, but this card is doing a lot. I've already talked about how fog effects are super underrated in the format. I literally just played this in a game recently where it saved my butt. But again, we have to be putting graveyard hate in all our commander decks, right, guys? And this is that as well. This is doing dual purpose in your deck, and it is going to save your life in probably a couple of different situations. My opponent is attacking me with that Craterhoof Behemoth attack. Just cast this, I get the fog effect, and the shuffle graveyard part is just added bonus. It's also going to save my butt when my opponent is about to living death, and I will shuffle that guy's graveyard into their library so they don't get to reanimate anything, and the prevent damage part is just an added bonus. It is also going to save my butt when my opponent is milling me out. Now I can shuffle my graveyard into my library, and I'll just wait until someone happens to be attacking me so I can also prevent combat damage as well, right? It is just so much value on a 2-mana card. Maybe I'm just in a deck where I have important pieces that I want to shuffle back into my library for whatever reason, right? I'm in a Captain Sisse deck, for example. Well, I can just search my library for whatever I want. This is a slam dunk there because I can just shuffle that stuff back into my library when it gets killed, and then I can immediately get it back with my commander, right? So there's so many great places for this card. You're never going to be sad to see this in your hand. All right, I'm going to end off with Master of Death, a card that I just recently added to a deck of mine. 1 black and a blue zombie wizard. When Master of Death enters, surveil 2. That's not bad. And of course, we have gotten more surveil commanders where this could be an extra good fit. It's also putting cards in your graveyard, so keep that in mind as well. The main reason, though, why I'm giving this some attention is because at the beginning of your upkeep, if Master of Death is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 life, and if you do, return it to hand. That is actually a really powerful ability because, of course, this is a card that you can so very easily return to hand. I just talked about recently Squee Goblin Nabob, a personal favorite of mine that I have put in so many decks, and of course, it's a card you never cast, right? You're just going to be putting it in that discard theme where I can discard it and then easily get it back into my hand so I can discard it again. Master of Death is in the exact same boat there. Here you have to pay 1 life, big deal. Don't really care about that, right? And of course, there's probably even more decks in a discard theme in blue and black. This is a fantastic fit because it's just free discard fodder, right? This essentially becomes, on your turn, pay 1 life to draw a card because that's what it's going to turn into. I have some looting effect and I'm going to loot and throw this guy in my graveyard, and then on my upkeep, I'll pay 1 life to get him back so that I can just loot and throw him back into my graveyard again. Fantastic in any theme like that. Also works great in the theme where you just want to be having stuff leave your graveyard, which I've talked about that theme recently as well. But of course, this guy you actually can cast because he has that enter the battlefield surveil 2. So I can cast this guy, have him surveil 2, maybe sacrifice him to something or chump block with him, get him back, repeat the process. He's just a great value-y creature as well. I think this guy can go in a lot more decks, and I think he's going to put in a lot of work for you. That is it. 10 cards from Modern Horizons 2 that you may have forgotten about, revisiting some of these sets that have existed pretty much since my channel has existed, but because we get so many commander staples in all these sets, a lot of these other cards get a little bit buried. Let me know in the comments below if you are going to be adding any of these cards to your decks. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.